Hello and welcome back to the Lore Raider. A few months ago I did a video asking if the Halo universe could withstand an X Parasite infestation. We came to the conclusion that the X absolutely obliterates the Halo universe. What about the reverse? Could the Metroid universe withstand an invasion against the Flood? What if we changed Metroid history to accommodate the Flood instead of the X Parasites? Could the Galactic Federation survive? Could Samus win? Let's find out together. If you need an explanation for both the Flood and the X Parasites, I recommend watching the aforementioned video, which I link in the description down below. Now, as for the scenario itself, most of Metroid history stays the same. The Chozo prior to the first game discovers the Flood like they did the X Parasites and determine them to be a galactic threat. They as usual create the Metroids to counter them, release them onto SR3D8, and the Metroids hunt the Flood to near extinction. Remember, if the superior X Parasites couldn't stop the Metroids, neither can the unintelligent Flood. From there, history stays the same. The Pirate Federation War happens, following eventually by the Phazon Crisis led by Dark Samus. As usual, Samus returns to SR3D8 to exterminate the Metroids, and finally by the time of Metroid Fusion, with the Metroids exterminated, the Flood can run around SR3D8 freely. As usual, Samus joins the Federation on an expedition to the planet, where she encounters the strange Flood infection form, which attempts to latch onto her. So here we have the first question in the scenario. Is Samus killed right here and now? No. The Flood have a hard time dealing with beings with abnormal biological systems. For example, they were incapable of turning Sergeant Johnson in Halo 1 since his body was changed by being a Spartan 1. Samus Aran was a human Chozo hybrid who also had the feat of holding back complete Phazon corruption in Prime 3, unlike all her other Hunter friends, and unlike literally anything else in the verse, she somehow held off the X killing her in Fusion for several hours minimum. Don't know how, but she did it. So although the infection form fails to turn Samus, she will be dragged off to undergo surgery to remove the infection form, and like Johnson in Halo, Samus will be left with some Flood DNA, making her a human Chozo Flood hybrid instead of a human Chozo Metroid hybrid. What do you know? As usual, live Flood specimens are sent to the BSL laboratory, and the scenario truly gets started. The Flood quickly begin to overtake the rest of the BSL staff, turning them into combat forms or infection forms for Samus to deal with. But on the other hand, unlike with the X, the majority of the creatures aboard the BSL station are fine, as they lack complex nervous systems found in sapient creatures for the Flood to infect them. In effect, the only boss that would ever become a Flood would be the box robot, as it has a big complex brain under the armor. Every other boss was either an unintelligent animal like Ceres, a brainless cyborg with no nervous system like Nightmare, or was a freezer-dried body too decayed to infect like the corpse of Clone Ridley. As such, whilst I believe there are enough humans aboard to make a proto-Gravemind, it seems likely that Samus will have an easier time dispatching them than she did in the original timeline. While Samus deals with the Flood scum on BSL, we need to talk about another potential Flood infection I hadn't mentioned yet. Around the events of Metroid 1, all the way up to the events of Super Metroid, which is about a year, in the real timeline a single X Parasite managed to impersonate a Chozo soldier and stow away back to planet ZDR, in which that single X proceeds to multiply and eventually destroy almost all of the Mockin tribe of Chozo. The question is, would the Flood pose a similar threat to Ravenbeak's Chozo? Well, remember, Ravenbeak and his tribe helped work on the Metroid project and knew the threat of the X/Flood. Whilst they did fail to stop an X Parasite from slipping through security, it's worth noting the Chozo X looks like this, and the Flood looks something like this. Yeah, a little more noticeable, don't you think? It is extremely likely that the Chozo would be able to catch any sort of stowaway Flood-infested Chozo before any sort of outbreak started, which means the events of Metroid Dread changes dramatically. Back to the BSL station, however, there is no reason to assume that Samus Aran will not dispatch the Flood combat forms made from the human scientist. It is also likely that Samus and the AI Adam Malkovich will determine SR388 must be destroyed, like in the original timeline, to stop the Federation from abusing the Flood, and as usual, Samus activates the station's self-destruct sequence, and sends it on a collision course with the planet, exterminating the Flood from the universe once and for all. Well, that was surprisingly easy. Yeah, so the problem with the Flood, as terrifying as they are, they're only dangerous if they have sentient life with complex nervous systems to infest. On SR388, they would have had only the occasional pirate and maybe a Chozo or two to live off of. Otherwise, everything else was non-sapient. Because the Flood would have been feral, they couldn't have taken control of Chozo tech like the old Diggernaut, for example, either. And when they reached the BSL, whilst they would have been able to wipe out the human scientists who were mostly unarmed, they would have had an uphill battle against not just Samus, but the other creatures aboard the station as well. And Samus, mind you, as we discussed, had a complex enough biology and strong enough willpower to completely resist any sort of X infestation. Finally, unlike the very stealthy X Parasites, the Flood are extremely obvious. I mean, you can't be fooled into believing that they are anything other than Flood, which is why I believe Ravenbeak and his Chozo wouldn't succumb to the Flood as they did the X Parasites. Which leads to the final nail in the coffin. Free-floating X are intangible and can't be damaged, which is why they're such a huge problem. The Flood, at every stage, can be killed, so it is in my opinion that the Metroid universe will walk away unscathed from the Flood threat. But that's just one man's humble opinion. What do you think? Did I undersell the Flood, or do you think they meet their match here in Metroid universe? Let me know down in the comments section down below, and please like, share, and subscribe if you like what we do here. And as always, thank you for watching, and as always, please pray for a true peace in space.